Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So it's the end of the month again. Let's look at how Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is doing. Let's add to the typical content. Let's include the results of various other Square Enix mobile games. A couple weeks ago, I did a video on the year in review of all of the Square Enix mobile games, link below. But in between then and now, 2 games announced shutdown, Engage Kill and Full Metal Alchemist, so I won't include them in this video. If you're curious about those games' performance, you can check the linked video. Also, a warning up front, results here will be at the exchange rate of 140 yen to the dollar. The previous videos were at 150 yen to the dollar. Okay, but first, September releases. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis took in 2.8 million, Power Pro took in 3.6, Dot Hero took in 4.6, and Monster Hunter Now took in 10 million. As I said in previous videos, the typical pattern of mobile game performance is big numbers on release, and then a slide down, often drastic. It settles at a certain level, and depending on where it settles, that can determine the overall life of the game. We are seeing the slide down of Ever Crisis's numbers, but it's not very drastic, and I would say the game is still doing well. Not great, but good, and certainly better than all the games that have shut down this year. Previously, I compared the launch of Ever Crisis with Nier Reincarnation's launch, and although Reincarnation had a stunning launch month, Ever Crisis is showing more staying power with less drop-off, just as I suspected. But you compare it to Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, War of the Visions' first 6 months, and that was more of the revenue there every month. I don't think it's a sign of War of the Visions being the better game. It's more a sign of the industry sagging, and Square Enix in particular sagging. Sales are just down across the board. The yen is weak, COVID lockdown is over, and China and Korea are putting out great games. Alright, here let's look at some Square Enix games. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, 680k. War of the Visions, 1.3 million. Record Keeper, 560k. Romancing Saga Re-Universe, 4 million. Tawatsugai, 650k. And Octopath Traveler, 700k. Here we see that the other Final Fantasy titles are not that strong, and that War of the Visions, which I just said had a strong first 6 months, has steadily dropped to the level it is at now. However, War of the Visions follows that pattern of releasing broken units at New Year's, so I expect a big jump next month, which could possibly help fund the development costs for the rest of the year. And we'll see if Ever Crisis follows that same model. If you ever see a bad January for War of the Visions, then you know the game is in trouble. Okay, some more Square Enix games here. Dragon Quest Walk, 14 million. Dragon Quest Tact, 2.6 million. Dragon Quest Champions, 800k. Schoolgirl Strikers, 440k. And Nier Reincarnation, 240k. Here we see Dragon Quest is still the breadwinner for mobile Square Enix, but Champions, which just came out, is not doing well. That's kind of shocking. Dragon Quest Tact Global just announced shutdown. Clearly, that version was not doing well. I saw it was so low, it was not even appearing in sales rankings charts overseas. But can we draw any conclusions from that about what that means for the JP version? I would say not really. Again, the global and Japanese markets are very different. They like different things. And I don't know if the different versions of Tact were handled by different teams, and if the global team was just not getting it done. And it's official, Nier Reincarnation is now doing worse than Schoolgirl Strikers. I destroyed this game's revenue with my negativity, despite never making a video in Japanese. Or at least that is what my haters would have you believe. Or perhaps the developers destroyed their own revenue stream, and I was just pointing out how they were doing it. Something to consider. Alright, and as usual, some other mobile games. Nikkei, 6 million. Honkai Star Rail, 11 million. Genshin, 10 million. Uma Musume, 15 million. And Monster Strike, 48 million. Okay, so those were the results for December. January should see a jump for all games, but we'll see about that next month. For the remainder of this video, I wanted to talk about 2 topics. One was limited time bosses in Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, and then 2, what makes a mobile game successful? I got some questions about why this game or that game is successful and still running. But yes, I wanted to ask folks in the comments how they like the limited time bosses of Ever Crisis. As a gamer, this is what interests me most about Ever Crisis, because I miss the limited time bosses from Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. Are they fun? Are they challenging? Or are they just frustrating? Are they account checks, or do they require real thought? Can they be beaten by clever dolphins or free-to-play users? And are there multiple ways to defeat these bosses? Regardless of the answer, I will not pick up the game, but I'm just curious. Okay, and then finally, let's talk about what makes a mobile game successful. I got some questions, sorry I didn't answer them, but I can kind of answer them here. And kind of the same things are present for all successful games. But it's stuff like constant new content. I'm not talking about like new game modes all the time, I just mean more content in the existing game modes. If you ever see a big gap in stuff like new bosses or new events or whatever, that's a worrying sign. Also, good and frequent developer communication. If you see developer communication just disappear for long periods of time, that's a bad sign. Quick bug fixes is also necessary, I would say. Bugs are going to happen. We can't blame the developers for that. What matters is how they address those. Generosity is also a big thing. Not just like in-game currency, like how much of the game is accessible to even free-to-play users. And then constant quality of life updates are important. These are not things that are going to lead to direct sales, but if the developers have kind of the time and the manpower to invest in quality of life, that means that they have some leeway, which is a good sign. And I'm not talking about like changes for change's sake. I'm talking about actual things that players want and need. Another very important thing, maybe the most important thing, is giving whales a real reason to spend. This could mean anything like good game balance or power creep, which is in line, and like the two types of power creep, player side and then game side, sort of being in sync with each other. Good customer service, although this is often done by outside companies. The main company will pay for this, of course, but the quality of the customer service can be indicative of the health of the game overall. And then a vibrant community. The game developer and publisher, they have a certain amount of say in this, but of course the community itself has say in it. If it's just a game itself, then it has to be a very excellent game in order to keep people motivated. But if a community is very strong around it as well, then that will enhance the experience of the game for everyone, and then keep people in the game longer and more devoted. And the final thing that makes a game successful, which might be the most difficult thing to achieve, is success. That might sound silly, a game being successful means it's more likely to be successful in the future. But it's just kind of inertia, Especially Japanese folks, they will look at the performance of a game and then see if it is doing well. Then they will be more assured in spending, There's going to be less chance that it's going to shut down, and their investment is not just going to disappear into thin air. And the more successful a game is, the more generous it can be, the more collaborations it can do, the more events and stuff it can have. And so you're more kind of guaranteed to have, lots of stuff going on. It's a snowball effect, and it can also go the opposite way. Square Enix, it's having a lot of trouble with its mobile games because it just has a bad reputation, and a lot of its games are shutting down. That affects the spending of other games. People don't feel like the future of their games is assured, so they stop spending in other games, and then those games shut down, and yeah, it's a vicious cycle. But yeah, have a look at the games that you play. If you have a lot of these things, that's a good sign. And if you're missing a lot of these things, then that is a bad sign. Alright, that'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the end of January. Take care.